reunion without a quorum at this point, but we are just going to be discussing things without any action.
Okay. Okay. So the only item on the agenda is page 454.
Yep.
And I think, Elizabeth, I don't know if you're able to give us an update on what you know. Larry and I have been trying to watch as many of the sessions as we can during a super busy time of year.
I know.
So
sorry.
I don't know no, it's okay. It's important. But I'm not sure if we're up to date on everything. So whatever you can share would be helpful.
Actually, the committee of conference is meeting right now at 1:00. So I'm not even completely up to date. They have been kind of piecemealing through and then going back and, exchanging proposals, and they haven't been very faithful to the times that they have set aside for their meetings. But I can give you an update as of 9:30 this morning. Okay, so just for those who don't know everything that's in the bill currently, I'm just going to give a brief overview of, I'm just looking down at my notes, so if I'm not looking right at the screen, that's why. Okay, starting with the foundation formula, which is a basic amount of money that would be given to each school or district in the state for accounting for each student. The foundation formula would apply to every single school, both public and private. It would not go into effect currently as it stands as of 9:30 this morning. It would not go into effect until the 2027-2028 school year. And it would be a base amount, and then public schools could apply for what are called opportunity payments of up to 10% over the foundation formula. Private and independent schools, I'm just going to refer to as independent schools. Private and independent schools could apply for up to 5% more, but they would actually have to show a need for it and be transparent about that need instead of just applying for extra spending. Although I would note that there is currently no way to discover what independent schools spend their money on. So the opportunity payments originally were proposed to those payments were proposed by the Senate to go into a fund that would fund school construction. That is no longer the case. They will now go into a fund that will buy down the tax rate. Okay. This morning they removed.
Hold on.
Yep.
Elizabeth, hang on.
Yep.
That statement sort of confused me about what the opportunity payments are for. So
The
if a school is, explain.
The opportunity payments are so you would get, every district would get a base rate per student, and then if a district wanted to fund up to 10% beyond that, that would be funded locally and would go into the education fund, or now a separate fund that would buy down the tax rate.
So, but if they're applying for a 10% to pay more for students, then how would that go into
Back to
funding
the
for the students? How would that go to the school districts if it goes into the fund to buy down the tax rate?
I don't know the answer to that question, Bill.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Well, say Windsor Southeast needs.
I know what question you're asking. I don't know the answer to it though.
Okay.
Hang on. Here, I'm gonna just put in the chat. Here is a link to the bill as of this morning. Okay, I don't know the answer to that question. Let me just get through all of this and then I can. This morning, they removed the entirety of Section 12, which was a section that put guardrails on what would happen in a district that closed one of its schools. Previously, it had a requirement that it students go to only existing independent schools. That's been taken out. If an independent school was close in proximity to, or and there was no public school. Previously, it required that students automatically go to a public school if there was one in proximity. That's been taken out. So everything about school closure and guidelines around school closure has been taken out. That whole section. They this morning they changed the class size minimums. They this morning they excluded kindergarten and they extended the class size minimums to all schools, including independent schools. Again, there is no statutory way to verify the size of classes in independent schools. So that'll be really hard to actually do. But they also changed the class size time average. Previously, it was class sizes over the average of 2 years, and it is now class sizes over the average of 3 years. I think I said that kindergarten is now exempt from class sizes. First grade would have a minimum of 10 students across the board. And now if a school violates class size minimums, then now the Secretary of Education may address the school in terms of school closure instead of shall. The current or the bill as of this morning does not require a 4,000 student minimum. It is now generally and not mandated. That will be those districts will be decided by retired superintendents and some legislators. I think 4 legislators, 2 from each the House and Senate.
I heard 6, Elizabeth, just
Okay.
in our 6. So it is a majority of legislators and less educators on that committee.
Yep. Homestead exemptions have been restructured so that they now exclude the first $400,000 of property value, and the income exclusion is currently in flux. So it has ratcheted down over the last 5 years. 5 years ago, it was 142,000. This past year, it was 125,000. And I think they're going to try to move it back up so that, is that right? No, this version of the bill has income sensitivity of 100,000. So it's still going down, but they are going to study it. They have created a new tier of taxation for second homes or non-homesteads, and those exclude long-term rentals. They do not exclude short-term rentals, but they do exclude long-term rentals. And the Commission on the Future of Public Education in Vermont will be responsible for creating a process for public input on school closures. And they all have been pretty adamant about addressing the CTE funding program problem in the next session, because the way that CTEs are funded, that's career and technical education centers, the way those are currently funded is haphazard it's not systematic in our state currently. So they do plan to address that. They kind of went back and forth on it for a while, but they plan to nail it down in the next session. And let's see. The bill as of this morning allows for both supervisory districts and supervisory unions. The reason for that is that there are currently supervisory unions that include a multitude of structures, including some with school choice, like in our supervisory union. And so they plan to preserve that. And uh, and just to explain a little bit further about the opportunity grants, or whatever you want to call them, uh, those are funding that can be applied for by the supervisory union or supervisory district, as it is as it will those will be around 4,000 or more students. uh, That would like, if there was no opportunity grant applied for, then there would be no vote on the budget, because the students would receive the foundation formula. If any school or in the district, or if the district applies for additional funding, then there would be a public vote. Um, the uh, So that would likewise be the case if the supervisory district included an independent school. I think that's about it for the general. Do you have any other notes, Christine?
Well, I guess we have some question about the fact that CTE is not addressed and special ed's not addressed in this bill, and what that means
At
in
all?
the
Yeah.
future. Yeah, I mean, those are concerns. I don't think in the bill, I mean, I think we have questions about the, the cost savings. Will this really create a cost savings or not? We've definitely taken note that there's been a lot of time spent. It feels like a lot of time spent in committee on negotiations around independent schools.
Yep.
And, that seems a little bit strange since we're talking about public school. I mean, it feels like public school concerns, they're gonna get dealt with later, and independent schools, they're really at the forefront of the negotiations.
Well, it's not really surprising considering the makeup of
Yeah.
the Senate side of
Yeah,
this.
I mean, I guess I'm voicing some of the concerns I have about this bill, and the process, so.
That
Other than
one thing that that dilutes the potential savings overall is that they now have in the bill the money following the student.
Yeah,
So even if that means that even if a school closes, the same amount of money will follow the student wherever they go. So it doesn't really imply any true savings
right,
at
yeah,
all. None of the drivers of cost have been addressed in any way in this bill.
yeah,
And those being special ed and healthcare. Um, they were never mentioned in the bill. Uh,
yep,
they are switching to a statewide calendar, um, although I think it's in 2027, 2028. They took out unfortunately, and I'm not sure why, but somewhere along the line, I think the Senate proposal removed the switching the uh, financial calendar, unfortunately.
Okay,
So the December letter will still be the December letter.
okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess, as reflecting on it, and it's coming fierce and fast, and, we have some concerns. As is, the current version, yeah.
So my concerns are, first understanding how the opportunity funding works. I mean, I understand why they did that because wait, let me take a step back here. In the base amount, do they consider any poverty factors or any other factors, or is it just a
Yeah,
base net?
yes, it is the base amount plus the pupil weighting factors.
Okay.
They're not the same, though. They're not the same as they currently are.
That's right.
Oh, I know, but at least there's some sort of weight in
Yeah.
there because, educating a student in Barry is significantly different than educating a student in Woodstock. Um,
Yep, and also, uh, so just gonna oh, they are going to decide whether they're going to study whether it costs more to educate a high school student or not. And based on that, they will either
Mhm.
increase that weight or not. Currently, it's not in there.
so
Yeah,
another
they took
question
away
I
his.
had, yeah, another question I have is how they define a class for the class size minimum, because there's often high school classes, for an example, that are either based on an independent study. So being a data administrator at Hartford, when the superintendent asked me what's the average class size at the high school, it's a really hard calculation to make because I have all these classes with one or two students in them because they're either independent studies or special classes, or they've pulled out student to
Yeah,
within a course.
the last language I saw, Bill, it said core classes at the high school.
Yeah, it doesn't include specialized classes in high school or upper level classes in high school, if that
Okay.
helps.
So there's a question in the chat from Megan, which is, what are the class minimums? How will it affect the schools in RSU? So they've taken kindergarten off the table because it's not required. First grade, is it first through third? It was 10, or when
That's
does
right.
it go up?
I think it's first through third are
15.
10, and then I think it's 12, 4 to something, and then 15.
And then 18 in high school, I believe.
Yeah.
So
I
I
think they
don't know.
lowered that to 15, but
So Megan's asking, will it affect schools in RSU? Yes, it will. I believe. Although average 3 years over time, we'd have to look at it. So
So
possibly, yes.
So I want to mirror what Christine said and then take another far. Three things that are pretty significant within this bill that is left out is special education, healthcare, and construction.
Yep.
And I think at some point they have to attack those elephants in the room. And if they want savings, construction has to be addressed. If you're going to get more students on a fewer roof, you have to build schools to do that.
Yep.
And if they can somehow tie construction to consolidation as an incentive, then they're going to make progress in the savings. If they're not, then basically, then you're just shuffling the money around. I think that's what you were implying, Elizabeth, is that
Yep.
the money goes with the student, and all this does is it ties the town's hands or the district's hands on how much they can spend on a student. It now goes almost completely into the state's control. And when you're dealing with a dysfunctional Department of Education, this is nothing new for me saying the Department of Education is completely dysfunctional, then that really makes no sense to take towns almost completely out of it.
I totally agree, and I think going a little bit further, I think it is utterly irresponsible. Like during Act 46, which lasted almost 2 years for our supervisory union, during Act 46, we had a totally functional agency of education, and at that time it was complete traumatic chaos.
Yeah.
And we now don't have a functional agency of education, to the point that when we pass laws in the legislature, we discount having an agency of education. I mean, it's that dysfunctional. And so the idea of having a move towards consolidation without having a functional agency of education, I think, is completely irresponsible and belies the inexperience in education uh, of the people on the committee conference.
Yeah, so I think maybe if you can tie, and I know you can't do this, but if the legislation can tie something into benchmarks of improvement for the agency of education, if the agency of education can do X, Y, and Z, this next step of the bill can move forward. If the agency of education can show X, Y, and Z, so they have, I mean, they have a data job to do basically, and they're
Yep.
not doing it. And so if there's a committee, and one of my points here is that educational experts should be equal to those of the legislature. That's a basic requirement, I think.
On the task force.
On the task force, yeah, you need to
I
have.
agree. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I personally think it should be all based on educational experts, but I know that battle's not going to win.
I should point out that they did get into the bill restructuring of the State Board of Education, which means that it would be, I think, 3 gubernatorial appointments, including and 2 students, and then 1 appointment each from the House and Senate, which is new and an improvement. Yes, John.
Yes, John.
I'm sure that all of you know this, but committee to conference report, we can't make any changes on either an up or down vote. So when it comes out, we either have to say yes, no, and we can always take it back and say, you got to create a new conference committee and try again. But we can't make the kind of subtle changes that we'd like to see.
So John, I think that's a very good point, and a point that I understand. So I think the point of bringing these things up is that when Elizabeth asked for this, she wanted to know our opinion and how we wanted to vote. And at this point, the minimum requirements of this bill, which would be the expertise in the agency of education to make it happen, a reasonable timeline to make the transition, and dealing with special education on some level, healthcare and construction. Those are the minimum requirements. And so that would lead to a basic no vote in the committee.
Or you would vote no, Bill, if you were there.
I would vote no. Yeah. Yeah, I would vote no.
Larry has his hand up. I don't know if you can see him, but he has his physical hand up in the room.
Oh, I can't see him. Oh, hi, Larry.
Hey, can I give my thoughts?
Please.
Yeah, so this is for John and for Elizabeth. This is just my thoughts, not representing, the SU, but Act 153 was passed in 2010. That centralized HR and transportation, the business office, special ed at the SU level. Act 166 was universal pre-K. That was passed in 2014. Act 46 was the consolidation law you referred to earlier, which was passed in 2015. Act 173 was a special education law, which was passed in 2018. Act 72 was a facilities law, which was passed in 2021. Act 127 is the educational financial reform, which was passed 3 years ago. And then Act Universal 64 was universal meals, passed in 2023. My personal feeling would be to let the cake bake. And I think passing such a huge change after all the changes prior, particularly with what Bill talked about at the AOE level, and they would be ultimately responsible for much of the work, I think it would be akin, if I was the IT director at the SU, to changing going from Chromebooks in 2 years, then now we're going to go to PCs, and then 2 years later we're going to go to Macs, or in the financial, it would be like, we're changing curriculum every 2 years, right after we've trained everybody up on it. The district quality standards that Act 127 passed go into effect July 1, and it's hard to get excited over all the work. And by the way, we're doing pretty well with it when it's going to all change. That's one thing I had to say. The other thing was, as far as tempering spending at the local level, I think the excess spending threshold does that. I know it's not a fan of some board members as we get closer to printing for town report for the town meeting, but the excess spending threshold does set a governor on local spending, and it's Heartland's decision, for example, whether to go under that or to spend more of that, and that money could go into any other sort of fund. So I think the excess spending threshold, if the idea is to temper profligate spending at the local level, even when the budgets are voted on and voted up, I think I would keep that excess spending threshold going. I think it's working. There's also, it would be the local decision on the vote. When I go around town and I talk about this legislation to a person, when I mention that there will be, according to the way the bills are written today, there will be no more local voting on your local budget, to a person, they hate that. I've never heard somebody come up to me and say, well, I really like that. That's a good idea. They should really do that. They say, wait a second. You mean I can't vote on my local budget? I said, no, there will be no more. You're going to get X amount per kid, and the district board will ultimately decide how to spend that along with administration. They do not like that. So I think that's a really important thing. I am also skeptical of central office savings and consolidation. I think Act 46, Elizabeth, like you just said, was passed recently, and there were mergers much bigger than Mount Scottney School District. Essex Westford, did it save administration costs? I don't know. If it did, then great. If it didn't, or if this cost savings were swallowed up by special ed or health insurance, then I would say that would be a vote on the negative side of the ledger. My thing about the 4,000 ADM, Burlington is roughly 3,800 ADM. If you want Burlington's ADM, you're going to get Burlington Central Office. That's what you're going to get. So I just looked at it. We have at our SU, we have 6 people between the business office and HR. You probably all know them by name. Yeah. Burlington has 14. So they don't have an HR person like we do. They have an HR department, right? They don't have a payroll person like we do. They have a payroll department. And I think scale, once you get up to 4,000, 8,000, I think that a lot of that scale is changed. Again, we had 7 people at the business office and HR last fiscal year, and we went down to 6 because we tried to do the right thing for the taxpayer in our SU. And I don't know, when local control is taken away, how much those school districts are going to be able to do that if they can't even vote on it. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Larry. That is really valuable input. I really appreciate you sharing those thoughts. It really does make a big difference.
Thank you.
There's also the question of, what running a 4,000 student district would actually look like on the ground.
Yeah.
So one of the key points of Larry's point is the time frame.
Yep.
If you're going to make changes, then any change in education takes 3 to 5 years, because you're dealing with people here, and then in year 2, you realize X, Y, and Z was just stupid. And so, and that's what's going to happen if it's a 2-year time frame. We're going to go to 26, 27, and all of a sudden there's just no
And
time to work out the kinks.
Speaking to Elizabeth's on the ground concern with the 4,000 ADM, there's a huge difference between a 4,000 ADM in 3 buildings, right? Elementary, middle, and high,
Yeah.
versus a 4,000 ADM spread over 60 square miles and 15 school buildings.
Right. So, I mean, a couple of us have been pushing for, but it turns out we can't do it, but a couple of us have been pushing for mandating BOCES instead of going straight to a 4,000 ADM, because that would actually, create relationships. And then if we wanted to expand to a 4,000 ADM, we could do that at another time. But BOCES would be a good interim measure. But that wasn't in the original bill, and things that were not in the original bill cannot be introduced during a committee of conference, unfortunately. So that's why that idea was never really considered.
Elizabeth, what are your thoughts on, so they're in committee this afternoon, still working. I've heard, and I don't know all the details, but I've heard the statement, there's a lot not to like in this bill. And so they still hash it out, but I know that there's been some concessions already that are not to like. And so the vote's Monday, so they're done after today, and the
Today's
vote.
yeah.
Okay.
The expectation is that today is the last day.
Okay.
Although I just heard today for the first time that they may be going into Monday.
Okay.
So I don't.
And then after the vote, I thought I heard John say it can go back to conference committee. Is that what might happen?
What he's saying is that if it gets voted down, so what the process is that the conference committee will come out with a report on what each side agreed on, and then
Okay.
we actually vote on the report. If the report gets voted down, we can either go back and choose another conference committee, or wait for the governor to start the whole process over again.
Okay, thanks, that's helpful.
Yeah. And again, there's no it's just an up or down vote. There's no amendments, because that would have to include both the House and Senate, and it would include the original committees. And so that's why it's not part of those rules.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Does anybody else have any questions or comments?
Yeah, I would. I'd like to thank you, Elizabeth, for taking the time to explain this to us and seeking our input. And I'd like to thank John for joining us and taking time to participate. This is how government's supposed to work.
Can I ask if any of the people who have been off screen, if they have a particular way, one of the things that I have been concerned with is I don't want to, I've been trying to consider my vote on behalf of both constituents and the supervisory union board, and what I perceive to be the things that are like the highest priority values in both of those groups of people. And I don't want to necessarily insert my own opinion about that. I'd rather know what people consider because that's the red line for me, is violating any of those highest priority values. And like the fact that I value public schools, the protection and preservation and support of public schools as the highest value, that's not necessarily what everybody else values. So I'd really love to know where other people are standing in that respect. Anybody?
Thank you.
Bill? Nancy, I see your hand.
Yes, oh, I'm in a stairwell. I too value public schools, and I value the ability of a board to govern its own schools and for the public to be able to vote for their schools and what they want to spend the money on. Those are my values.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Nancy. Thank you. Anybody else?
I think, echoing Nancy, that's, as a citizen, that's a big value for me personally. I think a rhetorical question to the legislature as a whole would be, when you guys do redistricting, you change the town border. So like Donna Sweeney only represented Windsor for a long time, and now Elizabeth represents Windsor and West Windsor, and I think part of Heartland, if I'm correct.
Yep. Heartland, West Windsor, and Windsor. Yep.
Yeah. So like, I think, that's what redistricting does. Redistricting does not go from 100-person legislature down to 10.
Right.
That would be a significant change to the kind of social compact or whatever that we have. And I know there may be the AOE and the governor and the Senate and the legislature may want to get more away from town districts. And I think the SU is a model there as far as that is. I mean, rather than each town having their own superintendent, it's like a mini BOCES. You each pay for a portion of the superintendent. Instead of paying for all of special ed, you pay for a portion of special ed. So like, I think, that might be one way around it. But I would say to the legislature rhetorically, like, how would you feel if you were redistricted from 80 members down to 10? I think it wouldn't be a good feeling. So,
and I also, add it piggybacking on that, Larry. I feel like if you were a really great business, and because I feel like some of the people who have been on these negotiations have treated education like a business and not a public good. So if you treat it like a public or like a business, and you were going to just and you had an outlet for that business in every town in our state, and then you just said, we're just going to close, at least 20% of these outlets and let the chips fall where they may, what would that indicate? Would that indicate a thriving business or a business that is getting back up on its feet, or would that indicate a business that is circling the drain? I mean, I guess you would want to close underperforming branches of that business, but you would have a metric.
yeah. Well, again, I think that's
right.
That's why I mentioned the district quality standards. I was at a workshop in Montpelier 2 weeks ago, and there is some work, and this is going to be reported out to the SU board at the retreat, but there is some work we need to do. But as far as district quality standards, I went in thinking, oh my gosh, this might remake a lot of our processes inside the SU. But we do a lot of things very, very well. As I was going through it, I'm like, well, geez, we're going to make easy work of this. There are some things we have to fix, but everything else from an accounting and finance standpoint, we're in really good shape. And yes, I guess what I'm saying to you, Elizabeth, is that the district quality standards kind of show the way. If there was some teeth to the State Board of Education to implement the district quality standards, and there were underperforming districts or SUs, then you deal with those.
Right. Yep.
I
Just
guess,
like we do with students.
Yeah, agreed. I guess I have one more thing to add, Elizabeth. I'm worried that there are a lot of constituents, community members who are not paying attention, and they're going to be pretty upset when they're told, no, your child is now going here, your school's closing. I just feel like there hasn't been enough community input on this bill, and I just think people are going to be really surprised and they're going to be really upset. I think I think we did a good job in this SU around the merger, but I know there are districts that are still working through the merger under Act 46, and there are still hard feelings and anger and frustration. And I think, we're not a business. We're a public good. We're in the business of people, and the people matter, and what they think matters, and what they feel matters. And I think it's going to be disastrous if we don't do it right and well, and with a lot of care and time and intentionality and feedback and input.
I totally agree with you, Christine. I feel like all of this ignores the fact that education is like top to bottom and side to side based on relationships. And none of this in any way tends to those relationships.
Yeah. Well, thank you for what you're doing and for allowing, for getting us together. I think it's fast moving, and it's helpful to sit and talk through it. So I appreciate your advocacy there, and I hope we've helped you and John, anyone else.
You really have a lot, and I really appreciate you you giving us your thoughts. I know it's not a lot of people, but it's a much greater sample than just John and me. And I think we've done a pretty good job here of keeping people up to speed on what's going on and what potential changes there might be. I will note that while we've been on here for the last 44 minutes, I've received 60 text messages. So I think they're probably back at it right now. I'll make sure to, one thing that's really interesting is that I asked my husband he has all of the AI subscriptions, and I asked him to take the bill, and because it's 157 pages long or something like that, I asked him to take it and run it through with these particular prompts that I can't access because I don't have a subscription. These particular prompts, like comparing the most important facets of the bill to other states, and there, like, not one piece of the bill is like in other states. And in fact, and I asked it to consider, because it's such a long document, I asked it to compare certain facets of the bill to outcomes in other states, and it actually gave several warnings on consolidation in a short period of time, which we already know. And that's not even considering I-46 or the other things that we have. The other thing is that, speaking of the two biggest cost drivers, that it doesn't include removing some of the things from some of the drags on the ed fund, which would still cost, but they would not be property taxes. So anyway, that's where we are. Thank you so much for coming. And
we'll get this video out on the website as soon as possible.
Okay.
So watch it.
I want to thank everyone too for the input, and I haven't heard anybody in this meeting come forward and say, this is a great bill, we encourage you to vote yes.
I have not received a single email saying please vote.
Does anybody want to jump in and say, yeah, you should vote yes?
Yeah. Okay, good. I mean, that's where we are. Not good. Anyway, okay. Well, when we get to a final, we'll let you know how it goes.
Okay. I will call this meeting. I will call this non-meeting to close, because I don't think we had a quorum anyway. So
thank you again for doing this, Bill. Thanks,
You're
Christine.
welcome.
Thanks, Larry.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Bye for now.